Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining and welcome to another session of our Day One and Beyond series, where we take you through various topics and activities related to building solutions on Oracle Cloud. My name is Stan, and I'll be your host for today's session. This will be the second session of our eight-part series on the Oracle Analytics Cloud Platform, or OAC. This series is designed to help you unlock the full potential of OAC and transform your data into actionable insights. In a world increasingly driven by data, OAC empowers organizations to uncover hidden patterns, make data-driven decisions, and drive success with advanced analytic capabilities. I'm thrilled to kick off this journey. To lead us through today's webinar, I'm honored to introduce our featured speakers, Umar Kumar from our Customer Enablement team, and Pete Medora as our analytics expert. With that, I'll hand it over to Uma.
Thank you so much, Stan. All right, well, welcome everyone to today's session. Like Stan mentioned, my name is Uma Kumar. I'm a senior cloud engineer on the Customer Enablement Personal Training team, and I'm joined by Pete Medora today. So I'll be taking you through a brief slide deck before passing it to Pete to take us through the demo of OAC. So a brief agenda of what we'll be covering in the slide deck is just an overview refresher on Oracle Analytics Cloud. You can also watch the on-demand previous first session that Pete did. But brief overview there, and then we'll go into some of the key features of dashboarding, and that Pete will be demoing in his demo today of OAC. And lastly, we'll have time at the end after the session for any Q&A that you might have. So let's jump right into our overview of Oracle Analytics Cloud. So OAC can be thought of a comprehensive analytics platform. So it provides you capabilities for augmented, self-service, and governed analytics. So for augmented analytics, that's essentially when we have embedded machine learning into different aspects of your analytic process or workflow. So OAC has built-in AI capabilities that provide you with augmented analytics, like our auto insights features or natural language queries. We also can provide self-service analytics, which is that end-to-end self-service environment for data visualization. And that's where we'll be kind of spending most of our time today in the visualization and dashboarding aspect of things. You can also use OAC for governed analytics. You're able to scale and extend out to an enterprise level, having, your different users take on different roles in Oracle Analytics Cloud, as well as take advantage of OAC's enterprise architecture and security. So now I want to talk a little bit about, just a overall holistic view of an analytic workflow or process shown in this diagram. So it begins with your more technical tasks, right? Like connecting to your relevant data sources, or maybe you have to model these sources into logical business views. And then you can move on to your data preparation stage. This is where you'll do any sort of enrichment or data transformations that need to be made. And then you can start going into your more business-centric tasks like exploring the data, making some insights. This is going to allow you to create visual stories and kind of an experience that you're able to share with your different colleagues through collaboration. So OAC is able to kind of take you through all of these different steps from connect to collaborate. But again, today we're mainly going to be focusing on in the demo, the explore and experience pane. So kind of how can we use the different built-in tools and visualizations in OAC to create a story, to create, rich kind of insights from your data. All right, so now I'm going to briefly talk about some of the core features and capabilities for visualizing data in OAC, and we'll be, again, going through these in a lot more detail in the demo very shortly. So for the first concept, we have our workbooks. This is where you will store and organize your analytics content. Workbooks can be created either using data sets or subject areas. And they have a drag and drop interactive experience to help you create your different visualizations. So workbooks are going to be how you can organize your visualizations and also play around with different graphics. And once you've made the visualizations that you want to include in a report, then you can share and collaborate, moving your canvases from the visualize to the present pane. Next, we have our different types of visualization. So OAC comes with over 40 different types of visualizations available out of the box. You can also add custom visualizations using Oracle Analytics under the console, under extensions, and you're able to drag and drop to auto-create visualizations as well based on grammar. Additionally, you can just manually select the visualization that you want. So this tool, Oracle Analytics, has multiple visualizations, and based off of the data you select, it can also auto-suggest chart types. For example, it might recognize that you have selected a geospatial field and then suggest a map. Auto Insights in OAC can also provide you with automatic visualization suggestions that give you great insights into your data. All right. We also have the capability of adding filters. Filters allow you to focus on the data which you're interested in. And there's a few different ways that you can create a filter. We have workbook filters. That's going to be used in the workbook filter bar and will apply to all canvases in the workbook. We have a canvas filter that applies to a single canvas in the workbook. Dashboard filters are used directly on a canvas to enable end users to filter data on that canvas. And visualization filters apply to just a singular visualization. So these are several different types of filters, and Pete will be demoing a couple of them in the console soon. Next is properties. So there's several different ways that you can format and customize the visualizations that you use, from size and positioning to style and color scheme. So I'm going to ask Pete now, like, Pete, what do you think are kind of some of the more popular or valuable properties that end users can use to, make more customizations to their visualizations? Because there's quite a lot on here, as you can see.
Yeah, Uma, that's always a tough question to ask because every visual has their own set of properties. But what we do and what I will show throughout the demo a little bit today is some of those hidden properties or more features that allow you to do less work with more, and really can unlock some of the potential of some of these visuals. But I'll be covering some of those during the demo today.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So next we'll briefly talk about the different types of export options. So today more than ever, users, need a choice on how they want to share and collaborate their data. So with OAC, there are several different types of export formats, including Excel, CSV, PowerPoint, PDF, and several others. There's also an option to email a workbook out via schedule or on demand. So these are just the different options that you have to export out your workbooks and your reports that you've created. Another option is you can actually just share your workbooks directly in OAC with different members of your teams using this concept shared folders. So you can grant users roles to have varying levels of access to your workbooks that you are putting in the shared folders. Pete, is there anything you want to mention on kind of how granular you can get with the access of shared folders? Like, what are the kind of restrictions around it or the different types of roles that people can have?
Yeah, security is built into every part of this platform. But when speaking specifically about folders, folders can have multiple sets of properties. For example, you can have one folders and multiple nested folders or children folders in there. They can all have different properties. And these folders can have different access groups, whether you want individual users tied to them or groups. And then you can even give these different users different privileges within a folder. For example, maybe someone can only view, where others might be able to read, write, and allow them to add subfolders. So just know that within this platform, security is everywhere, and users are only able to see the folders, the data, and the workbooks that they should have access to at all times.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So with that, those were the kind of key features of dashboarding that I wanted to discuss today. So I'm going to hand the screen over to Pete.
Thank you very much. That was a great overview of what we'll be covering today. Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Pete Madura, and I'm really excited about today's session. Building dashboards is and has always been my favorite aspect when working with data. For the next 40 minutes or so, I'll walk you through more than just the basics on how to build and think about building dashboards in OAC, but show you where you'll spend most of your time, best practices, things to consider, along with a few tips and tricks to speed up the development process. I typically go fast so I can cover as much content as possible, knowing that these will be available on demand in a few days. With that, let's get started. Here we are on the OAC home screen. I'm currently running on January 2025 Enterprise Edition. To understand which release you're on, simply go to your profile in the top right, select About, and that will display the current version. The About screen will also show you all the latest features that were just added with the newest release, along with a description and a link directly to the documentation. We also post video clips of each new feature on the Oracle Analytics YouTube channel. I'm currently logged in as an administrator, and to execute any workbook development, you must be a DV author within the platform. We'll be covering roles, responsibilities, and permissions in a later session focused on administration. For those that were unable to attend the first session, I spent a bit of time on basic navigation and how to customize your home screens, so I'm only going to briefly cover them now. In the top left, you have your main menu. In the top right, you have all of your create menu. The home screen is organized by object type, as you can see workbooks, data sets, and data flows. You have complete control of how that looks by changing the order of them or maybe showing more rows of any one of these object types. And if you have a scenario where you want to group different types of object types, maybe you have a project going on and you want to group some of the related data sets and workbooks and maybe machine learning models, you have the ability to create what's called custom groups and then just select the different objects that you want to have in that one group. Since this is the intro to dashboarding, I did my best while developing this content to not assume anything and remember that we probably have a lot of first-time users out there. So it only makes sense for me to step through the controls within the workbook editor. Before we do that, let's look at some ways to create a workbook. For all methods, you will need to have some data available. And the main option is go up to the create, say create workbook. It's going to open up the workbook editor, but it's always going to prompt you for data. And so I'll select my data set, add to workbook. And now that data set has been added to the workbook and I'm ready to start building. So that's one quick way. Another option is to navigate directly down to your data sets, whether they're on your home screen or you go to the data set menu. At any time, you can select the data set. To select it by right-clicking it, the default behavior of selecting a data set in this platform is to open it up in the workbook editor. And lastly, if you are working with any flat files like CSV, text, or Excel, you can just drag them over to any of the menus, let go, and if you say OK, it will import it. If you say visualize, it will import it and bring you right to the workbook editor. So there's that file that we just imported and it brought us right to the workbook editor. All right, let's head back to the home screen and now select our data set for this demo. There's probably a few ways I could break down this workbook editor screen, but I felt it made sense to start at the top, where you'll see 3 workbook modes: data, visualize, and present. Data mode is where you view the data objects within your workbook. It also provides an area for data blending and several other features. That's where we're going to start today. Visualize mode is the default mode and is where you'll spend most of your time developing. And then present mode. This allows developers to customize how their consumers will interact with the workbook. And we'll be covering each of these modes today. Let's take a few minutes and cover data mode. In a nutshell, this area allows users to visually see all the data sets they have added to the workbook and view and edit any relationships that may exist. If you've been granted edit capabilities for any of the data sets, this little pencil icon will be enabled. If you click it, it will open up the data set in the dataset editor in a new window. Now, what this really does is allows you to make changes without closing the workbook. And now if you make any updates to the data set, it will automatically be refreshed in the workbook and there's nothing you need to do. If you want to add more data sets to this workbook, you have a couple options. You can add data here or add data there, and then just add them directly to your workbook. A few other options in here include reload the data, download the data, even replace the data set. That's a very handy feature if you need to swap out different data sets. And then, of course, remove from the workbook if you have multiple data sets in your workbook. All right. That's moving on to visualize mode. Before we start creating visuals, I want to review your workbook options and properties. Let's start on the top left-hand side of the screen. We start with the data panel. This is where you have access to all of your columns, data sets, and calculations. Next up is the visualizations panel. This platform has over 40 native visualizations and another couple dozen free to download on oracle.com. Next is our analytics panel. This displays statistical elements that you can add to your visuals like outliers and forecasts. And lastly is the parameters panel. Parameters are one of the most powerful features within the platform and allow users to create static and/or dynamic content that can be referenced throughout a workbook to provide a better user experience. We won't be covering these today, but they will be discussed at length during our advanced dashboarding session coming up in April. This area right here is blank for the moment and will be enabled once we add a few visuals, so we'll come back here in a few minutes. Moving up to the top right, we have the workbook toolbar. Some options include undo, redo, and just a quick note on the undo. Don't forget about this feature. It's usually my best friend when developing. You can refresh the data source, export the canvas or workbook, save, and provides access to some of the augmented features like auto-explain and our new AI assistant. Next is the workbook menu. This is where you can adjust workbook level properties, workbook themes, and a few other options. Let's take a minute and highlight a few, but there's not a lot to cover here. For workbook properties, some examples are you could add custom text to display when your visuals don't retrieve any data. Or maybe you want to add a background image for the entire workbook, along with a few other features. Workbook themes allow users to set certain visualization properties and colors to an entire workbook and even save them for others to use. This is great for driving consistency across all of your workbooks within your organization. And a few other notable features are the ability to create and manage data actions and developer and diagnostic tools. These topics will also be covered in our advanced dashboarding session. At the bottom of the screen, you will see your canvases. You can also think of these as dashboard pages. To add a new canvas, simply select the plus sign. For basic canvas options, select the up arrow to the right of the name. And options include clear, duplicate, and delete. To rename a canvas, you can simply click the rename button up here, or just double-click the canvas name down here. To rearrange, you just grab the canvas and drag to your desired location. And then each canvas has their own set of properties. You hit the arrow again and go to Canvas Properties. Some notable features are layout type, which we'll be covering in a little bit, Maybe you want to add a custom background, and it even contains an auto refresh mode that can be set to seconds or minutes. Back at the top, the filter bar is one of the ways to quickly add any column you'd like to filter on. When you add a new filter, it will apply to all visualizations by default. You can configure filters to affect only specific visualizations, and we'll be spending a bit of time later on all the filtering options in this session. All right, now that we know how to navigate the workbook controls, let's add some visuals to our initial canvas, and then we can walk through the remaining areas within this mode. There are several ways to get started building visualizations. Let's go through them now. You can start by dragging columns over to the canvas. I'm going to select sales, and I'm going to multi-select using the control key, and I'm just going to drag it over. And right there, it's telling you what it's going to create. It's going to create a bar chart. I'm going to let go. So that's definitely one way you can let the system decide based on your selections of what type of chart. If I select these again and I say create best visual, it does the same thing. Two ways to do the same thing. That will be a common theme across this platform. Let's go ahead. What if you know, right now we know it's creating bar charts for us, but what if I want a table? Well, you can multi-select your columns, right-click on it, and then pick your own visualization. Maybe I do want a table. All right, drag that over here. And lastly, you can put the visualization type first. If I go to my visualization panel, and maybe I bring in a tree map, I can then add my data to it. So many different ways to kind of get started. And once you get into this tool for a while, you'll find the way that is best suited for your work style. Now, these are, I would consider, more of the manual ways. I also want to quickly touch upon the augmented ways. We did a bit of this on the first session, so I'm going to briefly do this today. But the three areas are the explain feature, the auto insights, and the AI assistant. For the explain feature, go to any column in your data set, right-click it, have it explain, and remember the explain feature will load some basic information about it, key drivers, segments, and potentially anomalies. If you find a chart you like, select it and add it. For auto insights, this feature looks at your data holistically. So it's looking at all of the different columns within there. And when you find visuals you like, again, you can simply select them, add them to your canvas. And our newest feature is our AI assistant. This is where you get to ask a question against your data in natural language. And we're just going to ask, please display the top 10 states by profit, and we'll see what it comes back with. All right, so here's a map that shows state profit filtered by top 10, and I can add that to my canvas. All right, so those are most of the ways to get started in this platform to building visuals. So you don't typically have a blank canvas that you have to worry about. There's a lot of other tools to help you get started quickly. All right, let's close this. Now that we have some visuals, this panel over here has now been enabled. This area is called the grammar panel, and it is where you manage the columns associated to your visuals. Note that every visualization type has standard drop zones. So if I look at this tree map, these are my drop zones for a tree map, and maybe I want to give it a little color. I'm going to move subcategory down to color. So these are just examples of drop zones for this specific visual. And again, every visual has different drop zones that are enabled. Next is the properties panel. This is where you typically will spend most of your time. Each visualization type has a unique set of properties that will allow you to control various aspects from basic formatting, adjusting the legend, creating a custom tooltip, and dozens more. You'll notice we have different property categories, and these are all listed right up here. For this visualization, we have a General tab, a Values tab, a Filters tab, and an Analytics tab. Some visualizations will have a different set of categories available to them. Now, if I hover over a visual, you'll see the visualization toolbar appear right here. These options are the visualization toolbar. Some options include conditional formatting, sorting, changing the visualization type, maximizing, adding to watch list, and a few others. These options here can actually be enabled or disabled for each canvas, and this is done within the present phase. And lastly, if you right-click on a visualization, that will bring up the visualization menu. Options include the ability to export, zoom, conditional format, duplicate or copy, or even delete the visualization, and several others. All right. Well, at this point, we've covered most of the controls within the workbook editor. And now that everyone has a solid foundation on where and how to navigate, we can start building some dashboards. But just before we start building, you may want to ask a few questions like, will users be consuming this via a mobile device? What's the volume of data this dashboard will be querying? What options do I want to give my consumers? I'll be answering these questions as we build out some of the dashboards for the remainder of the session. All right, so we are going to, I'll delete this canvas. I'm going to clear this canvas, give us a nice clean slate. And let's go ahead and start with measures. These are indicated by the pound sign icon and will automatically aggregate. You can hover over a column to see the default aggregation. So for this one, if I hover, there you go, see the aggregation is set to sum. These defaults are set when preparing your data, but a developer can override these defaults in the front end on the visuals. Next, we see the A icon, which stands for attribute. These columns do not aggregate. And a quick tip, unless you plan on doing math against a column, make it an attribute, even if it's a number. For example, you may have an ID column, which is a number, but you would want to make that an attribute so the system doesn't try to aggregate it. Next up is the date or time columns. These are indicated by the clock icon. Dates are automatically broken down into smaller date and time parts. This means you don't need to build calculations to extract aspects of a date and can use any of these date parts in your visuals. And finally, we have location-based columns. These are displayed with the map or location icon, and when you drop these on a canvas, the system will automatically select a map visual. All right, here are some tricks for getting some quick answers. If no visualizations exist on a page, you can double-click a column to get started. Let's pick a measure. When picking a measure, this will automatically create a tile visualization, and of course, it will aggregate it on whatever the aggregation level is set to. Sticking with measures for a minute, let's drag a few more on there. If you just drag them and drop them, they too automatically create tile visualizations. Now, do you notice that all the visuals are given equal spacing in the canvas? That's the default layout type. If we look at canvas properties, we have two layout types, auto fit and freeform. As you'll see throughout this demo, auto fit automatically adjusts visuals as you adjust their sizes. Freeform allows you to deliver pixel perfect sizing and alignment, as well as stack visuals and other workbook objects on top of each other or overlap items like you would in PowerPoint. This is a great property to be aware of. Here's a tip. If you're planning on building workbooks that would be consumed mostly through our free mobile app, Oracle Analytics, then stick with AutoFit because it's much more responsive across all devices. All right, let's play around a little bit with AutoFit. To move your visualizations around, place your mouse on the header of a visual. Right there. You will see the cursor change. And now simply click it and drop it where you want it to. I'm going to move a few around, grab sales, bring it over here. And now when I grab quantity, I want to explain these drop zones. I'm going to select quantity. That green bar indicates where it's going to land. So right now it's going to land in between those, in between profit and discount, in between record count and sales, on top of record count, on top of sales. And if you hover close enough to the top, that bar will go across all visuals. You can see that. That's telling it, hey, I want this visual to go across all of them. And that happens from bottom, left, top, and right. If we go all the way to the bottom, eventually, there we go. We get the full green bar, and now I can have it down there. So those are really the ABCs of moving these around. You have a lot of flexibility, so you might have to play around with it for a bit, but you will be able to get your desired layout by just configuring these. Also, when you have an intersection of visuals like this, you can move them all at once, and you can see they all auto adjust to whatever your needs are. All right. Now, for one of these, let's add a border to one. So I'm going to collect quantity. I'm going to go to Properties, General, Style section, Border, Round. Now, what if I wanted to have everything a border? Well, we spoke about this earlier. That's workbook themes. I can come here and say border, round. Now you can see they all have round borders. And even if I add a new visual, the border's there automatically. We're just going to undo that. All right. We are going to rename this star measures. And now, wouldn't it be great if all these measures could live on the same tile? Well, you actually can do that. If I come over to my sales, I can take my other measures and start dropping them directly into this tile. And as you can see, these tiles can hold more than one visual. And to drive that point home, so check that out. You can add a lot more information to these tile panels. And the good news is every measure you drop in there in properties, they all have their own property section. So it allows you to adjust each one individually based on your requirements. I'm going to undo that last dropping of 5 of them. But I also want to show you what else you can do with these tiles. So for example, if we come over, since we're in properties here, this label position section refers to the top measure. So our top measure is sales. That's the first one. This secondary position, let me give us a little more room, is associated to anything after the first position. So again, primary, everything below is secondary. Now let's see what we can do with that. If I go to secondary position and I want the orientation, let's make them horizontal. All right, I think that looks a little bit nicer. Let's make this a top center. And on this sales one, let's adjust this a little bit. The label position I want before. Let's give this a little size and color. And we'll increase the size of the value font too, so they match. And of course, right here, do we really need the decimals? Probably not. We'll go here, and we will turn off the decimals. So everything is configurable. All of these lower ones are also configurable. So a nice way to pack in a lot of information on these tiles. Now, one last feature I want to show you here, you can add spark charts to these tile visualizations. If you go to the grammar panel, we have this category section. These will take dates and attributes. I'm going to get my order year for my date, drop it in there, and there we're going to see a little spark chart. And now we have a whole new set of properties to control that, all right here. You can see we have different chart types, different colors, maybe the position. Maybe I want the position below. And maybe I want to stretch that. Okay, remember, you can switch the visualization type. Maybe I want a bar chart, high and low reference, maybe even a reference line. You can even give a description because they might not know what field this is. So you can see here, with using the spark charts with multiple measures, there's a lot you can do on this screen with these tiles. All right, let's move on from just measures. I'm going to create a new canvas. Since individual measures automatically create tiles, an attribute will automatically create a table. So let's bring in state. All right, now we have our table. Now, how do you add additional fields to this? Well, there's multiple ways. I'm going to do subcategory. I'm going to drop it in the grammar panel. And sales, I can come right over to the chart. Doesn't matter. Once again, 2 ways to do the same thing, whatever you're more comfortable with. Now, let's take a moment to show how to swap and change columns. Let's say I want to replace sales with profit. Well, I can grab profit, and as soon as I hover over it, right there, that little icon tells you I'm going to replace sales with profit. And that is no different over here. The icon even appears right on the chart. So that will basically, you have to look for those little icons on where you drop it. If you did want a new one, as we've already been doing, you can just drop it there. And to swap columns, you can select one column and drag it on top of another. And right there, that little icon indicates you're going to swap them. This is great for charts that have like an XY axis, and you kind of maybe want to swap the columns there. So we can swap them. Of course, we can undo or swap them back. All right, and there's just a few other properties I'd like to share with you on tables. I can come into Properties. I'm going to go to the Totals tab, and I want a grand total for it. All right, I have a grand total, but it's down here at the bottom. Well, if you freeze grand total, it's always on the screen, and it maintains the scroll bar. And maybe you want a subtotal. I'm going to subtotal state. And now we have subtotals by state. So, I mean, we're just scratching the surface of here, but very powerful to work with tables and pivots within here. A lot of different features and properties we're not going to be able to go over today, but just kind of wanted to show you a few there. All right, this is a great place to basically save our workbook. So if I go up to the workbook toolbar and I'm sorry, I actually forgot one quick thing. This is very important. One last feature I want to talk to you here. Remember how on measures, we were able to add all of this information on these tile visuals? Well, almost every visualization here has that same ability. So if you go to the grammar panel, there's this tile section. So let me grab all my tiles, all my measures again, drop them in there. Now think about this. You have that same flexibility within every other visualization you have, and you can do you can start doing the same formatting where I can come here and say horizontal, center it, and we can keep doing it like we did before. So you can add these types of measures directly onto other visuals. They are not dedicated just for these tile visuals. So very powerful way of adding more information, sometimes taking up less real estate within here. Good, so happy I caught that. So this is a good point to save the workbook. So we come up to the workbook toolbar, we hit save. We'll call this Intro to Dashboarding. And again, by default, it's going to go to your My Folders, which is kind of your playground. If you want to save it in the shared, that's kind of like the universal. That's where your whole organization can share and consume workbooks. Within here, you will see folders that you've been given access to. And even if you go into a folder, you can actually, if you have the same rights, you could save it right there or potentially create a subfolder. But those are all permissions that can be given by the administrator to you to be able to do all the necessary saving. We're just going to save it in My Folders for now. All right. Other features are we have the Save As and an Autosave feature. All right, let's close out this workbook so you can see what it's like to open it back up and get back to editor mode. I can see I did a little spelling. I'm even going to come in here. Intro to. There you go, learn how to rename a workbook if you wanted to. So I have my workbook here. I just saved it. I'm actually going to favorite it. So it's now up in my top bar. I always like to have my favorites up top. And I'm just going to click it. Default behavior is to open up the workbook. But it brought it into consumer mode. However, the workbook knows that I'm able to edit it with this little edit icon here. You simply select it. And now you're back right where we started, or right where we left off, being able to edit any of the information here. All right. Let's go ahead and create a new canvas. So some of you might be wondering what this layout option is. OAC allows authors to create custom layouts for their workbooks. Along with workbook themes, this is another option to help drive consistency within an organization. Let's quickly look at one of the system layouts. See, these are two that are with the system, but you can create your own. We'll just select one and say, okay. And I might have selected the wrong one. Let me do that. Perfect. Okay, we'll delete this one. So you can see here, at this point, you're just dropping your columns onto the different visuals. I see we have a couple donuts, a line chart, a few tiles, and a filter. So let's start kind of filling this in. Since these are all tiles, I'm just going to drag them up here. And you can see you have a drop zone here and here right on the visual. So these drop zones are handy when you want to drop them to a specific area within that visual. All right, so that's a good start. Let's take a look at our line chart. So for this one, I want to use sales and order date. All right. This may be a little granular for most consumers, but before I change it, I want to point out two powerful options, zoom and maximize. This chart may not appear usable, but by showing your consumers how to use these options, they will thank you. First, we're going to maximize. All visualizations have this option. Next, we're going to right-click and do zoom. This bar down here represents what you are visually seeing on the screen. And you can slide it. So just because there was a lot of data packed on there on the chart doesn't mean it's not usable. You just need to let the consumers know about these features and enable them for them. So if I close out and maximize, you can still have zoom right here on the main screen. Doesn't have to be in maximize mode. So two features I want to make sure everyone is aware of, but let's get rid of zoom for a minute. Right click. And let's say it is too granular. Well, I'm going to come over here to order date, and I'm just going to show it by month. So think about how easy that is. So on here, let's change a few other properties. I'm going to click the chart, always click the visual to set the properties. And I'm going to give it a title, and we'll call it sales by order month. We'll give it a bold right here. These dates are a little bit too long. I'm going to customize those. Change the format. All right, nice little format right there. And let's not forget, you can actually change the chart type at any time within here. Maybe I want a bar chart. And maybe I want data labels on my bar chart. So I can go to Properties, Data Labels, Auto. Okay, that's way too messy, but we can change that. Let's go to number format, change it to a number, 0 decimal places, abbreviate. All right, much easier to read. And lastly, we have X and Y axis just on this chart. We have sales. So this order date by month, I can make that a little bit cleaner. I'm going to come to the axis and say, this is really order month. And maybe your users know very clearly that this is all sales and you don't want this here. Well, you can turn that off. I can just say, turn that off. Gives you a little more real estate, especially if it's not going to help out the user understand what they're building. So a lot of different things we can kind of do on these charts, but that gives you a little sense of some of the properties that you can adjust quickly. So down here, I'm going to delete one of these. I don't want one. And one I'm going to change to a tree map. All right, so in the tree map, the grammar panel, I'm going to bring in profit, and I'm going to bring in ship mode. And I want a little color there. All right. Now, when I go to this visual and I look at my properties, and maybe I want data labels, well, look, there's more values. I didn't have these when I was doing my line chart. Maybe I want the percentage. See, and now you have the percentage on the chart. So that's what I'm saying. Every visual has different properties. So you kind of need to go in and explore a little bit on these properties. Here's a nice little donut chart. We'll just do subcategory and sales. Okay. This gives us a bunch of different charts right here, which is nice. And two other things I want to show you in this one. When you are lining up multiple visuals, you can multi-select them. And this provides you two different options. One, you can distribute with. Get it exactly how you want it. So that one didn't look like it did a lot, but let's bring this over a little bit. And now we have them, they're all a little changed. Click them, distribute with. But also when you multi-select, you can change properties on them, but you can only change common properties. So they all have to share the same properties, but for these ones, I'm going to say I want them all center. And maybe for the value font, I'm going to bring it up to 27. So you can see that. And then, of course, they don't need that much room. All right. So that's about all the time we have today regarding visuals. But before we move on to filters, here's another trick for building better and quicker dashboards. Any visual within here, if I click this visual down here on the right, I can right click, edit, look, duplicate, copy, paste. I'm going to copy. I'm going to go to a different canvas, edit, paste. Now, what you might not know is you can also use your keyboard. I'm on a Windows, Control C, Control V. And I just copied it or pasted it 2 more times. I do this all the time when I'm unsure of the best visualization to pick. So I might switch from this one to, all right, a donut. Maybe I switch this one to, whoops, maybe a bar chart. So this helps you kind of understand which one helps explain your data the best and which one you think your consumers will most easily be able to understand. So not only can you copy, paste, and duplicate these, you can also do that for the canvases and the workbooks. So there's just no need to continuously reinvent the wheel when you're working with this service. So I wanted to make sure to highlight all that. All right, so we need to spend a few minutes on filters. We have several filtering options here. Up here is your Canvas or workbook filters. To get it started, you can simply drag any column up there or simply select some columns that you want. Now, by default, these are all wired to automatically filter everything on the screen. So let's say ship mode. All right, so all of our values just updated in real time. Of course, we can undo, set that back. Now, that was just for an attribute. So you have different looks for attributes. You can add and remove many. For dates, you can have listings, but basically you can see each one individually. You have ranges. Maybe you have a start and an end to it. Even relative time. Maybe you have a report that's rolling 30 days based off today's date. You can set that in here. So every time the dashboard runs, it's always doing a rolling 30 using relative time, and you do not need to create calculations for those. Very powerful. For measures, you automatically have your ranges here for min and max. You have little sliders here for some of your values. You can do top and bottom, all very easily. Now, all of these are targeting this canvas. And for example, on this visual down here, if I go to my properties and look at my filters, it tells you this is being filtered by all of these canvas. What if I don't want ship mode to affect this? Well, I can turn it off. And now when I run ship mode, you'll see this chart won't do anything because it's not tied to the filter. So you have that type of control in this platform. Now, if you want filters to be for all canvases, you hit this pin. That pin will now appear on every single canvas. Those is what you would consider global filters. So no matter what, any pinned ones will appear at the top on the canvas filter bar automatically. All right, a few other, we are going to be spending more time in advanced dashboarding here, but a few more things I want to talk about. These are great for global. These are great for hidden filters. They are great to, if you want users to add their own filters, this filter bar is great. Maybe for quick self-service analysis, they're really good. And all of these are controlled into present mode. So present mode is where you can turn and allow the configuration of what they can do with this bar. Let me go to back to my other canvas. Dashboard filters, which is an object right here. This is my dashboard filter object. These have a lot more precision. And what I mean by that is they have properties. So here, if I drag a bunch of fields in here that's to ship mode, segment, category, and sales, you can see that. But what else comes with dashboard filters? They can sit anywhere within the dashboard. And you can see they'll even adjust. Maybe you want them at the top of the screen. We'll just undo a few times. Get it back to where it was. I love my undo button. You also have different looks and feels because they all have properties. So I can come here to ship mode and say, I don't want a list. I want a checkbox because I don't have a lot of values, and it makes sense. So you have a lot of different configuration options, including making fields required, allowing multi-selects, allowing default values. And I think one of the most important ones is allowing to add buttons. The reset and the apply button. Reset is pretty self-explanatory when you have lots of filters that you're looking to use and you want someone to easily reset them. The apply button is great, is when you know users will typically come in here, want to select more than one filter at a time, but it's a large data set. So maybe you give them the apply button so they can select a few at a time, then hit the apply, so they're not wasting time waiting for the refresh in between each click. So there are pros and cons to using both of these. It's really all about your use case. But we'll talk about this a little bit more in advanced dashboarding. All right. So next, we're going to take just a moment for calculations. Again, these are really going to be focused on our advanced dashboarding.
Yeah, I had a question on calculations. Is this
Yes.
like, your like regular expressions? Are they just your normal math operators? Like what types of calculations typically would people use this for?
Yeah, I usually answer that question by saying all of the same calculations and functions you've been using in Excel for all these years, they're loaded into the tool. So for example, if I right click on my calculations down here, I can right click and create, or come up here and say create. And this is my calculation window. You give a name, a description. This is the editor window. And these are all the built-in functions. So of course, like for math, you have all the functions here. Let me expand that a little bit. String functions, aggregate functions. We have some that are dedicated to this platform, like time series calculations. You can even do case statements right within here. And if you're unsure how to create it, not only will it give you the description of what it is, it gives you the syntax on how to write it. So let's just do a quick one, for example. Let's do profit percentage. When you start typing down here, it will start looking for any data points in your data sets or functions. And I can just do that. I can drag over sales, validate, save. Now I have a new calculation, but it's part of the data set. And of course, I can drag it up here, have it part of my visualization now, and do all the formatting. So again, real quickly on calculations today, we'll be spending more time in April on advanced dashboarding on a lot of these areas. So that leaves us with a few minutes left, and this time is reserved for present mode. Present mode is all about the control you want to provide or limit for your consumers. First thing to know about it is some of the properties relate to the entire workbook, and some of them can be configured by Canvas. For example, workbook level ones are bottom tabs. Like, do you want the dashboard pages to appear at the bottom or the top? I like top. Do you want this header bar configured? The workbook name, do you want the workbook name and the Canvas name? Do you want to add your logo? Do you want to change the font, the color of all this whole header bar? This workbook toolbar options, you can turn them all off. Maybe you don't want users exporting. Maybe you don't want them undoing and redoing. You have complete control over that. Now getting into Canvas level filters, that is where, do you want that filter bar? This is my Canvas filter bar. Do I want to show that? This is where you decide, maybe you can have some global filters up there, or maybe you decide to use dashboard filters and you want to hide this bar to save real estate. On the visualizations, do you want them to be able to change the visualization type? Yes, I do. Do you want them to be able to sort? Do you want them to be able to drill, zoom? We talked about that earlier. Export their data, right? All of these are controlled by each canvas. So you have a lot of different features in here. And I encourage all developers to take just 5 minutes to review the options available within the present mode. I also want to call out that we are planning a dedicated session called OAC for consumers, unlocking consumer controls, later this year. I'm just going to save this and run it so you can see what it looks like. And there is our dashboard. We can even see this is where the pages are up top. We didn't name them all well, but we do have some canvas filters here. We have a dashboard filter objects, and of course, select a few of these. I can hit the apply button down here, have those run, adjust my screen, reset. So that's a lot of, again, it's how the user, how you want your consumers to use the platform is all about the present phase. All right, to wrap up today, let's look at the basic options that are available directly from the home screen. If I go to my workbook, by inspect, which is my properties. I can export it from here. I can do a schedule from here. I can move these around between different folders. I can duplicate. And then finally, the delete option. And that is a beautiful place for us to end Intro to Dashboarding. Let me delete that workbook. And that concludes our demo today. I want to say thank you to everyone who attended. And as always, I hope this was a good use of your time. I also want to say a big thank you to Uma, Stan, and the entire team that helps put these sessions together. A quick reminder, our next session will be Intro to Dataset.
If you want to learn more, we also have a list of links for self-guided or free and paid different types of learning where you can get hands-on experience with OCI. Our team also does various different offerings. Aside from day one and beyond, we have our quick shot live labs as well as our normal personal training where you can get one-to-one customized training on OCI for your company. As well as our sister team, Code Innovate, leads a 5-day, half-day online event where you can work with Oracle engineers to actually co-develop a use case and build out kind of a first pass of a prototype of the solution. So we also have links on there to learn more about these different programs and offerings. And lastly, this are, again, just some important links regarding the Day One and Beyond series. We have our core series, the OAC series, which is what we're currently in, hands-on, cloud native, security, and our Did You Know series.
Yeah, I can look at both of them. So one of them from Praveen, are there any plans to post a one landing page with links to dashboards as the first page instead of users coming in searching for a dashboard? Praveen, that is on the roadmap to be able to curate a dedicated kind of landing page, if you will, and even potentially for different groups or even for different users, potentially like your C-suite, where you can create a custom landing page just for them. Those are in the works. I'm not sure the timelines, but they are in development. And for Sandeep, how is OAC different from FDI? Well, or FAW, previously FAW. FAW is a complete data platform solution that hosts multiple services, ADW, ODI, OAC, where the OACs differ a little bit, but ultimately, if you are learning one of those services, you can translate all that knowledge to the FDI one. But there are a few differences between the services and how they are kind of configured in some of the administration tasks between the two. And yes, does FDI has its own OAC? Yes, it's a specialized FDI or previously FAW has its own special version of OAC. Everything you saw here today, plus a few other features that the standalone version does not have. And we will be deck will be shared on demand. It'll be available on demand in a few days on our Customer Connect page. So don't worry about that. You'll have full access to that. And that should cover most of the answers.
Awesome. Thanks, Pete. I'll pass it back to Stan for any closing statements or thoughts then.
Awesome session. Thank you, Uma and Pete. Really appreciate your time and help with the session. I hope it was a good learning experience for everyone. Our next session will be Introduction to Datasets in OAC in March. In this session, you will learn how to build datasets as self-service data models for your specific data visualizations and analysis requirements. Thanks for joining today's sessions and have a great day.